I was hoping we might have conducted this on the bed, but I guess we're going to do it down here in these folding chairs.
Poor me.
We rarely see plays like this anymore in New York. I think that's a safe thing to say. This premiered 50 years ago, right here in the East Village. I believe it was in an old movie house on East 10th Street. Take us back to 1967. Because I want a little explanation of this title. Take us back to 1967. Who were the real queens then, and why were they colliding?
Well, I wasn't here in 1967. I was a fucked up kid in Brooklyn. But well, Richard knows the story. Richard Curry, our lighting designer from The Ridiculous. But the myth is that the Playhouse of The Ridiculous was mounting this play. And John Vaccaro was the director, and he and Charles Ludlam had a fight over something. And there's many, I've heard different variations on what that fight was about. And Charles got fired from his own play. And half the group left with him, and that became the Ridiculous Theatrical Company. And then Charles wanted to mount the play, and then the Playhouse of the Ridiculous got an injunction against Charles that he couldn't mount his own play, so they changed the title. And it was Mario Montez, who was one of the actors in the group. This is what I heard. He suggested that it be called When Queens Collide because of John and Charles fighting. And so that's the story I heard.
And it was presented after midnight in an old movie house. In repertory with, I believe it was Big Hotel.
Probably.
Yeah.
That was like his first play, and then this was later.
What have you heard? You weren't there, but what have you heard about what those performances were like? In his biography of Charles Ludlam, David Kaufman described this as theater by people on drugs for people on drugs. Is that a fair assessment?
Probably. Yeah. And it was a different time, and it was the sexual revolution, and what did Charles, Eureka just told me, who was in our group, and somebody didn't, no, it was Julia Pearlstein said it to me, and she was an actress in the group, and Charles wanted her to go nude, and she was afraid to go nude, and then Charles said, well, we fought to be able to take our clothes off, and now you want to keep them on, and so that, you know, it was a kind of a sexual freedom, I guess, but from what I've read and stuff, I call it theater of rage, and that's where I land on all the time. But it was, in studying for this, Marlowe, who wrote Tamburlaine the Great, said that he wanted to revitalize the theater and move it away from strict iambics. And that's what Charles wanted to do too. And I find it interesting that it was this play that although Big Hotel in some respects is weirder, but it's not as jarring as this play. This play is, it's phenomenal in it, where it goes, where it takes us.
You were in a revival of this in 1979, I believe. What do you remember from that?
Not much. We were still doing drugs. I played Alice, and I didn't have the skills at the time to play Alice. I mean, I had nerve, and I had guts, and I went and did it. But looking back, comparing myself to Brian Belovich, it's different. It's night and day. But it was fun doing it. It was fun, and I think about Charles directing it, and he wasn't in it when we revived it. But then there was a newspaper strike that coincided with revival, so no one came to see it, and so we.
Yeah.
You got to ask the question.
Well, the last time I interviewed you, you quoted Nietzsche, who said, "Beware the taming influences of your time.
Right.
And that by the time you had actually joined the Ridiculous Theatrical Company, that taming had already begun to set in.
Yeah.
Is one of the reasons to bring this back and revive it now to harness that foundational rage that was a part of the company?
I suppose so. I don't. It just was presented to me as a possibility. So, and then that rage comes with it, and we certainly have a lot to be enraged about these days. So, but I revel in it when we're up there, especially in the last two scenes, and you look at this group of people reveling in this rage, and it's kind of fabulous.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to remark this, but there are odd parallels between Tamberlane and our own president, especially unyoking the world from reason.
Well, I deliberately, the first thought was to give him a red tie and stuff like that, and then I thought I don't want to pollute the play with that. I want to let the play speak for itself, and let the pretend president pretend to be what he is, and I don't want to mix the two. There's certainly despots before Trump, and I think it speaks to anyone who is oppressed. It was about sexual repression, and Charles did say he said, I get on my knees every day and thank God he made me gay. But he was also enraged that we weren't allowed to be ourselves, that gay people weren't allowed to be ourselves. But again, Charles did not make a case for gay theater. He said to me, I don't want to do to theater what people do to people. So he would, and he also said he was not into the message. He said, let's rock the people in their seats and let them do whatever they want with it when they leave. That will be the measure of the play. But
I'm interested in the role of the firewomen, specifically. Again, in David Kaufman's book, John Brockmeyer is quoted as saying that anybody who wanted to be in the show could be in it, that if you showed up, you were interested in being a fire person, they could bring you on stage and you would perform in that.
Right, there was even an aspect of that. The first play I was in was Caprice.
And you were a slave of fashion, I believe.
I was a slave of fashion, but I was also the ballerina.
Uh-huh.
And Charles invented the role the night before the play opened, and said I could do it. And it was like startling. But there was Marsha P. Johnson. Remember Marsha? She was in it a couple of times. She would just show up, and we all crawled on in that fabulous. We had this fabulous dress that had like 8 head holes in it, and we all crawled on in it, and whoever came could be in it. So they would, and I heard stories that people, everyone was drugged out, and the things would go on till 6 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and they would just pull people out of the audience and put them on stage. So there were like these happenings.
This sense of community, it was participatory, right? It was expanding this ridiculous community.
And it gave rise to, they said that we had our own following. I forget what the word was. I forget what that meant. I forgot to take my nail polish off.
Yeah.
This coterie of followers. And then the company, the reputation grew and the audience grew. So then there was no more, like I heard that Bill Vare, who originally played Bajazeth, put 9 cocktail fights up his butt and shit them out during the performance. That's how extreme the play was, and that's how extreme the play was meant to be. But in the 70s, going back to the Nietzsche thing, when we remounted it, you couldn't do it. It was absolutely impossible. Well, that government funding had taken place, and then you were answerable to that. And I guess at some point you realized you need to make a living at this.
Right.
And shit pies ain't gonna do it. all the time, you know. A steady diet of shit pies is and the other thing about it, I realize about it is it's a hard, I mean, it's a paradox or something, but you want to outrage, but at the same time you want to be liked. And that's a hard tightrope to walk.
Do you see anybody making that kind of outrageous, completely, outside of the norm and outside of the mainstream work in the theater today?
I think the only one who didn't succumb to the taming influence is Jeff Weiss. He's the only one, I think, who for some reason he kept himself. I mean, he's done mainstream things through his career, but in his own work, he has stayed true to the rage.
This is the second major ridiculous show that you have directed this year in New York. Of course, there was Theater Breaking Through Barriers, Artificial Jungle, which is a very different kind of play than this that we've seen. But also, Mr. Ludlum, is this the beginning of a mini ridiculous revival in New York?
I don't think so. I think it is the 50th anniversary, and the Theater Breaking Through Barriers chose the Artificial Jungle separately from the anniversary thing. The year before, it's the theater for the disabled, and their mandate is to hire disabled actors. It's an integrated company, but it mostly allows a place for people who are wrongly overlooked for work, and fabulous actors. And the year before, they had done this very heavy play that was it was like one of those gut-wrenching plays. And then the following year, they said they had to do something fun, just as a counterweight. And they chose, and Steve Asher, who used to be our business manager, is their business manager. And he suggested the Artificial Jungle because it's a six-hander, and it's 6 people, and it's not a major, it's cheaper to mount, and that's why they did it. And then it just happened to be the 50th anniversary. And then when that happened, Mia and Bev from here asked me to put this together.
If you had to revive any of Mr. Ludlum's works next, which would you choose?
With the group I'm working with now, I would do Big Hotel. Because I did a very successful revival of it in the 90s, which I love the production. It's very beautiful, and I would do it again.
I'd love to open up to questions from the audience if there are any. Yeah? Yes, sir.
Is there an actual script that's expanded? Did you update it at all or anything?
No, there's the book of Charles's plays, and it exists. And no, I left it alone. Let it stand on its own. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How's it directing a play that is largely a collage of all these sources? It kind of seems disjunctive on the page. How do you help communicate that to the actors to make connections between this line from Tamberlane and this little piece of newspaper advertising and this television commercial? I mean, because the collage is so jarring, it's a disjunctive.
Well, that's the fun of it, though. That's the fun of the play. Once you know that, you can, like, as an actor, I suffer. I'm not really good at analysis, at script analysis, because I cut my teeth on these kind of plays where you could make up in a what do you call it, motivation or
An objective.
An objective. That's the word. You could make up an objective and then create your way through, create your path. But with this cast, everyone was game for it. Everyone was just down for it, and it was, everyone got it right off the bat. So it just flowed. But part of the danger of approaching Charles's plays is we do have a bad reputation for being over the top, and it is true, we were allowed to be expressive, and Charles was a big fan of expressionism, abstract expressionism and German expressionism, and he was a big fan of it. But what people, especially directors, they miss the soul. If you don't imbue it with a soul, and if you don't give it reason, human reason, and an emotional connection. I've seen a couple of Charles's plays where the director just missed the boat, and you get these good actors who are just off the, and it doesn't work, and it's great because it's all the classical references and the commercials. Although Shane Baker, who played Tekeles, he was just a font of. Like I would say, well, where is that from? Because I don't think you need to know the sources. You don't need to know them. If you are stranded on a desert island after the apocalypse and you found these plays, you would have to apply the same reason to them. But Shane was, and then he, like you say, he brought in a Life magazine with 3 lines from the play. And so it means Charles was probably reading this magazine while he was writing the play, and
It makes you wonder what references are in Oedipus or Medea that are completely lost to us forever, you know?
Well,
what were they reading in Life magazine in Athens circa 432?
Right. The same, what was Shakespeare reading?
For sure.
Yeah.
One more question, if we have any. Yes, ma'am.
You were talking about that you don't, that this is for the 50th anniversary. Do you feel, though, that fear of this sort of this ridiculousness of sort of this exaggerated, impressionistic type of theater still has a place today?
Well, I think it's still relevant. For me, it's just a question of money. If I had Trump for a husband, I'd do it. You know?
I'd like to see that. Maybe you'll be number 4.
Maybe that would get him impeached, for God's sake. He has a secret gay lover and they'd throw him out. No.
It's that Russian dossier. This is what we're going to find. You're keeping something from us, Mr.
There are
Quinton.
men in the bed. No. I do think there is a place for it, and I think we have Taylor Mack, and we have David Greenspan, and there are many people doing fabulous work, and I think it's still relevant, but I think the ridiculous was a reaction to I'm not that smart. It was a reaction to an
oppression.
Oppression. It was a reaction to an oppressive time in this country, and right from the 50s into the 60s, and then what we were getting on TV, we were fed. Even the economy was false. It was. I don't know how they were shoring it up, but it was not real. It was meant to collapse. It was a Ponzi scheme. But what we were getting for theater was, or television, and like Father Knows Best, and there was this consistent lie. And even, like Charles was not a fan of slice of life drama. And so I do think there is a place for it. Like I said, if I had money, I would do it. I just don't want to be in that position again of the constant debt and stuff. So, but again, whatever the reaction to this time, people keep saying that this will generate some fabulous art. We'll see.
I certainly hope so. Thank you so much for speaking with me, and well done. So exciting to see this show.
Thank you.